Okay, with this, the whole idea of the blue gloves, of the emblem of Hashem Zakar that we had, the emblem that I have in the back of my shirt that I made a flag out of, that's in the bottom left-hand corner of the chart. I have a blue hand. So, well, why blue? Why the hand? Why should I have these gloves on as a big blue hand? The idea that the chart, which we don't have here this week, it's, I believe, in back, is that in the book of, was it Leviticus, I believe, where he talks, or in Exodus, where he talks about making the Mishkan, it mentions over 20 times that the embroidery of the Mishkan should be blue, purple, red, with white linen and gold threads. So we've gone through this before. The week of the Het, I went over that with, because I wore that Sioux Indian-style breastplate with those colors. And in pondering why those colors, why that order, it seemed like maybe it was a message, maybe it was a code, maybe there was something embedded in the order, not just the words that were describing the colors. And it seemed like, well, blue, purple, red. What does blue represent? And it's like, well, we're told to wear a blue tzitzi, or a blue thread in the tzitziot, in the fringes. And Yahweh said, when you look at that blue thread in your tzitziot, you will remember. So it's almost like he was commanding an immaterial event to happen. It's not like you might remember if you happen to look at the tzitziot. He said, I'm making a decree. He was establishing a given with his words, just like he said, let there be light, and he or and there was light. He said, when you look at this tzitziot with the blue thread, you will remember my commandments to do them. And when you do them, you get blessed. If you don't do them, you inherit the curse. You bring upon yourself the curse. You bring yourself to a point of disgrace and shame and embarrassment and defeat. So the reason for then wearing the tzitzi thread, the tzitziot, which are fringes made of threads with blue thread in them, is because we choose to play into receiving the blessing rather than perpetuating the existing status quo, you might say, of whatever system has been in place for how many hundreds of years, where we have no regard and things just go, it's like, just stuff happens. Does it have to happen? If he said, it's all contingent on whether you do what I said or not, then if we happen to forget, by default, we fall into the place of things not going our direction, or the direction that we would prefer them to go, aka the blessing. So if he says, do something rather foolish, wear these little flurry tzitzi, that's like the word tzitzi fly, right? This little thing that flies around, and that's the same Hebrew word, tzitziot, threads. Fringes at the hem of your garments. It seems like a rather silly thing to do. But he said, you wear these things, and when you look at those threads, I'm commanding here, you will remember to do my words, and I will bless you. So the reason we wear the threads and the blue, like the blue hand, is to remember to do what he said so that we can get the benefits of doing what he said. And then what else? Where else is blue mentioned? Well, the word techelet is the word for blue. I don't know how long of a leash I've got here. See if I can make it over to the board. The word techelet, there's a song that someone was singing on an album that we have that talked about the color of your people, Israel, and the word was techelet. Techelet is actually spelled Tav, Kav, Lamed, Tav. Techelet. You can look it up in the dictionary and it'll explain it's this color they got from the blue dye, maybe from a snail, maybe from some kind of a squid that was in the Mediterranean. The interesting thing about this word, you got the other one going? Okay, I'm going to set this one down. The interesting thing about the word techelet is it's a similar form to the word tabanit, which is tav, bet, nun, yod, tav. And one more time, I will state the correction if anybody hears this. On the chart, say this is the chart with the stripes explaining the meaning of the letters. On the right-hand side, in the gray in the middle, the word tabanit, I made a mistake and put the yod on the outside of the tav. It's supposed to be tabanit, not tabenti. There's an error on the chart. The point is, this word beni, as a word in the dictionary, you can read it means my son or my children. And the letter tav is future tense and or past tense. You might say both, but it also is the sign of the covenant. So you might look at this word, of course, if you do a circle around the tav, that's the letter tet, which is a full basket, that which is wrapped up or surrounded. And you might say, well, for the word beni to be surrounded by the tav is to say my son is wrapped up in the covenant, or my children wrapped up in the covenant. But the word tabanit is the word pattern. The word tahilit, kaf lamed, looking up in the dictionary, you'll see that it means all, complete, the whole of, which is virtually the same definition as the word shin lamed mem, which if you add a vav, it's the same as, it's shalom. It means complete, perfect. And actually, it's very similar to the meaning of the full basket, the tet, and also the zayin, which is the seventh letter, which also is the word shavah, shin, bet, ayin. All of these speak of the full measure, the full deal, the full oath, the full curse, the full measure of what you would prescribe to. So this idea of tahilit happening to be this color blue, and it may have a turquoise tint to it like this shirt, it might be a true blue, it may have a purplish dye. From what I understand, that this snail or squid, two different creatures they could have used, I suppose, that from what I've heard different stories, that if you harvest it daytime or nighttime, the color will come out different. So it wasn't like, gee, there's one hue that you can get a certain number, like if you're doing embroidery or if you're doing printing, there's certain numbers. It's exactly that shade. It really wasn't like that, but for some reason, Yahweh has chosen this bluish tone, which maybe has violet tones or maybe turquoisey tones, and maybe it's along quite a variegated spectrum in between. Maybe this cerulean blue of the Tahitian Ocean. But when you see this color blue, not only does it mean, well, that's the color of Yahweh's people, the color, it's like virtually the color of this ink here on the letter Yod. It was also the color of sapphire. Sapphire has a few different colors, but Moshe and the 70 elders, when they went up to Mount Sinai, they were in Yahweh's throne room, and they had this sapphire-like brick sort of pavework, sapphire colored. So this blue seems to be, well, that might be, I don't know that it's his favorite color, but he chose it to be a very symbolic color. And on the priest's garments, they had blue in the ephod and the blue cord around the neck. And so, this blue speaks of Yahweh the Creator. It's like, why should he say, when you look at this blue thread, you will remember to keep my covenants, because I'm the guy who made this place. I'm the guy with the blue throne room floor. I'm the guy who has acquired heaven and earth as my personal possession because I made this place. So you keep going over this concept of, I'm the one who made this place. I'm the one who made heaven and earth. I'm the one who designed it. I'm the one who fashioned it. I'm the one who designed the psychological functionings of every creature. I'm the one who put the planets and the stars in the sky and gave the principalities, the angels and demons, if you would, their dominions. It's like, he's the guy that has put everything where it belongs. So the big blue hand is the hand of the Creator. The letter Yod means hand. So if you look up in the Red Dictionary for the word Yod, spelled as Yod Dalet, though phonetically, if you spelled it Yod Vav Dalet, that's technically That letter sounds like an O. Of course, we know from the past lessons that the Vav also sounds like a V, a U, or a W. But it sounds like Yod. Yod. So the Yod of L is what this is about. So to play off the words, we had the guy from TV, right, Tarzan, yodeling. So I'm trying to just help these pictures stick in your mind. And we had the picture of this excavator with this opposable thumb. Some of them just are a backhoe, and some of them have this opposable thumb. But as with the opposable thumb, which looks just like this paleo shape of the letter. And the idea is to show you that image, so when you see this letter Yod, you'll remember this excavator and this particular sample we had up on the screen. This guy driving, operating it, was grabbing the rocks and picking them up and throwing them and grabbing another one, and you hear the, the Tarzan in the background. It's like, yeah, that's the Yod of El, just picking up planets and throwing them through the sky, as it were. And you can almost see it in this aspect. The Las Lunas stone in New Mexico has an interesting font variation. Some of the letters were more square-shaped. The way that I've drawn them is a little bit more diagonal, freeform, you might say. I think he draws the Yod one of these two dimensions, one of these two aspects where they change the dimension like this. The point is, it doesn't matter how you draw it. The idea of the description, almost like a hieroglyphic of the Yod, is this arm, this hand, like on the excavator, with this grabby thing, which makes things. That's the Yod. So whether you draw it like this, or like that, or this, or like this, the big blue hand is the creator. So on the emblem of the oath, the Hashem Zakar, which is the memorial name, the symbol of the memorial name, which is a whole other thing that we won't talk about now, but that image that I had made, there's this blue hand. Now the other thing about the blue hand is that the modern Hebrew, and I'm just trying to play with forms here so you get the idea of how the letter looks. The modern Hebrew is shaped pretty much like this, and we discussed this once before. Of course, it's solid body there, that it's kind of a picture which shows life. You start from nothing, little tiny spark, you get bigger, you fill out to the prime of your life, and then as you get old, it wanes and disappears. That's kind of the picture wrapped up in the modern Hebrew Yod, and it's the smallest letter. And as we discussed this for the letter Vav. The letter Vav, if you extend this out, that's the letter Vav. And they're called flame letters. In the modern Chaldean flame letters, virtually every letter is drawn with this little flourish. So the Aleph, you might say, has this thing down here, and then it's got these other two legs on it, and then the Bet has this little flame thing, and if it's a B versus a V sound, it won't have that. So if you look at all the modern Chaldean flame letters, the Gimel, again, has this little flourish, and it comes down, and then it has the foot that comes out, is that they all have this little flame, because the Yod is like a flame, and just like it says in the book of Proverbs, we were all like flowers quickly fading. We're here, we live, and then we're gone. What is man that you are mindful of him? The scriptures say it's like he's here, he's in his pride of life, his zest, his zeal, and all of a sudden, whoosh, he's gone. It's like, what are we doing with our time while we're here? And for those of us who are, of the certain generation where we don't have that many more years in front of us, why are we studying this stuff? Someone might say, this is just too much work. I'm too old. Learning Hebrew is too hard. I don't need to know another language. In fact, I was talking to a friend earlier in the week. This guy's from Romania, Eastern Europe, and someone asked him, I said, what do you think you're doing? Why are you wasting your time with Hebrew? What do you think you're going to get out of it? Very good question. Why are we here? I think that the answer goes back to the letter Yod itself. Let me erase this. It's hard to work with these gloves on, but I'm not sure where I put the eraser. Here it is. The whole reason for wearing the hard hat with the flames is because, you know, we see pictures of the, in fact, here I'll make reference to something. We see pictures of the king of hell, right? The devil sitting on a throne with a pitchfork surrounded with fire. However, on the chart, going back to the chart, you'll see a bunch of little glyphic images, a couple different ones at the bottom. I have some of the images, one per letter, and then the bottom row is kind of like a combination of a couple of the letters. But you'll see this one that I wrote, where there's some flames, and this kind of figure, as it were, sitting on a throne of a sort. And he's holding this thing which looks like a pitchfork, and there's fire around him, and then there's this floor of the throne room, and it's kind of going out like this, and it's under the position of the sheen. And so somebody might look at the image there and go, why do I have a picture of the devil sitting on a throne in hell next to the letter sheen? And then I have two scripture references, which I can't think of what they are off the top of my head, but I think I have them written right down here. The point is, if you look up those scripture references, you'll realize this is not a picture of the devil sitting on his throne in hell. This is a picture of El Shaddai, of Yahweh. He pictures himself surrounded by fire on his throne, and in front of him is this, as it were, sapphire brick pavework, radiating out, as it were. And the sheen in Paleo, written like a W, in the modern, the sheen is written like this. And either way you render it, if you were to put that on a stick, somehow a sheen on a stick, it might almost look like a trident, a pitchfork. You know what Poseidon was supposedly supposed to hold? It's a symbol of El Shaddai. So here the imagery that Yahweh has given about himself, again, the evil one, the usurper, their adversary, not being able to create his own stuff, what he does is he rips off Yahweh's stuff and says, oh, that talks about me. So when we see a guy sitting on a throne holding a sheen, a pitchfork, a three-pronged fork, surrounded by fire, we think, oh, that must be the devil sitting in hell, ruling hell. It's like, no. Hell was the place designed to torment the devil, his place of incarceration and punishment. It's not that he rules hell. We got the story all backwards because other people have told us different stories. It's like, what did Yahweh make? He made the heavens and the earth. He made the place of hell. He made, if you read through the scriptures, Yahweh says, very few places in the Old Testament I've noticed does Yahweh ever talk about the devil. We have a story about the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and we read about the book of Job, which is the oldest book of the Bible, apparently. You know, and you got this adversary. The word shaitan means adversary. But if you read all through the prophets, Yahweh says, I create light. I create darkness. I do good. I create evil. I will bring the trouble upon you when you guys don't do what I say. I will send, book of Joel, I will send my great army. And I remember this one time we were in church, well, more than once, singing, there's this song, it's kind of a famous song, it goes something like this. They run on the wall, great is the army that carries out his word. Does anybody know which army that is? It's in Joel, I think it's Joel chapter 2. Does anybody know whose army that is, that we sing it so majestically, huh? The Lord's army, but who is it? Yahweh's army, but who is the army? It's us. See, we have these images, we have these pictures, but we don't read the details. They're a bunch of grasshoppers, locusts. They're not, it's not us, it's not angels, it's not demons, it's grasshoppers. Read the book of Joel. Yahweh said, I made this place like the Garden of Eden, and I've given to you the beautiful land, and when you guys obliterate my word, I've got an army of 4 types of locusts, and he calls them in, and he says, it once was like the Garden of Eden, and after them, it's a barren desert. Gone. That's his army, which is why they can crawl on the edge of a sword and not get cut, which is why they crawl over the walls and through the windows, and it's like you can't stop them. I mean, if you picture billions upon billions upon billions of a swarm of locusts, that's who he's talking about. But we sing like, yeah, that's us. We're his army. It's like, we got to read the details of what he said. But if you finish reading the book of Joel, 4th chapter, also in the 2nd chapter it talks a little bit about this, Yahweh says what must happen in order to recover what his army was sent, dispatched by him to consume. Hopefully we'll get to that in the later part of the talk. But what I'm trying to show you here is that Yahweh himself has given us certain imagery about himself. What has this got to do with the Yod? Because if we picture the devil sitting on a throne surrounded by fire, with this trident in his hand, we've got the wrong guy. It's like we claim to believe in certain doctrines, but then we've misappropriated them according to what the real rendering of the word actually is. And so I'm just trying to throw these things out here to correct our understanding based on what he said. So the idea of the blue hand in this shape, and you could say, okay, if you look at the image, it's in this shape. Why is it that shape? Well, two things. One, this kind of concept is kind of like the modern shape. It's kind of like, well, there's the thumb and there's the hand. Okay, that's kind of like a yod, but they got the fingers separated. If you notice, there's 2 fingers there and there's a split and there's the other 2 fingers. It's kind of subtle, but it's like, what's that? Well, some people know that Mr. Spock on Star Trek would hold up his hands like this, and he'd say, live long and prosper. Well, the rabbis, apparently, when they're giving a blessing, they hold their fingers like this because these fingers like this now, form the letter Sheen. It's a symbol of El Shaddai. If you look at a mezuzah that people put on their doors, it has a sheen on it. And the phrase to live long and prosper, he didn't invent that. It's a Hebrew word. It has to do with the blessing of Yahweh to live long and prosper according to how you obey his commandments. And the reason they put it on a mezuzah on the door is because in Deuteronomy he says, you will think of these things when you lie down, when you rise up. You will teach them diligently to your children. You will write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. And so you write them on the doorpost of your house. The doorpost in Hebrew is called mezuzah. So you put a mezuzah on the mezuzah. You write the words on the doorpost of your house. The idea is every time you walk through the door, you're reminded. It's like having the tzitzit thread. In other words, the question is, what do we really expect to get out of studying these things? Why are we really here? Well, how much effort is this really worth? I was talking with some friends earlier today, and a question came up about what you do on the Sabbath day. And the question was like, well, if you enjoy gardening, isn't it okay to garden? If you're not going to buy and sell, okay, let's assume that there's a stipulation against that, but if you're not going to buy or sell, is it acceptable? Is it okay? Is there a legal loophole about going to a festival, a party, a fair, some other place of enjoyment, just to relax, just to let your mind be at ease? You might listen to a lecture, you might study, but is that an acceptable thing to do? And so as the conversation went, it was a matter of saying, I'm not going to give anybody a definitive answer, but here's the question. If somebody, and this is what I said to my friend, we're just reiterating to you a conversation earlier in the day. If somebody said, we're going to have a hopscotch competition. Hopscotch, that's a pretty silly little game. But the winner gets $100,000. How many people want to sign up? 2 people? Okay, then it's just between the 2 of you. Are you going to practice? Are you going to try to get that hopscotch just right? And it's like, okay, listen, this is a very simple hopscotch game. You jump on each step, but you miss this one right here. Don't touch that one space. It's like, okay, is the space too big? It's like, okay, how many times do I have to practice? I don't. It's like, you're kind of on the line. Okay, it doesn't count. You don't get $100,000. If we had enough incentive, would we really try to do the thing right? The question is, if we have no incentive for doing what Yahweh said, if he says, rest on the Shabbat, don't touch that space with your work, we'll say, what really is work? It becomes a philosophical argument. It becomes a little bit of a debate, a little bit of like, well, let's get some lawyers. Maybe they can help us spin these things and weasel our way around. But the question is, what if Yahweh said, tell you what, I'm going to put something valuable contingent on how you regard my stuff. In fact, what if he says, with the regard that you regard my things, is the amount of my stuff, my treasure you get. With the measure you use, it'll be measured to you. If you look at my stuff and go, yeah, well, whatever. It's like, okay, tell you what, when you get to heaven and you see all the treasures of the eternal universe in front of you and you go, wow, what's mine? And he goes, yeah, well, whatever. It's like, hey, wait a minute. Isn't it all mine? Because I'm in Christ, doesn't that mean that everything is mine that was stored up for me? And it's like, what if that's not the true doctrine? What if the fact that we get into heaven is different than what happens to us once we're there? And what if he says, I made it real simple. I gave every one of you the prerogative to determine the measure by which my stuff will be measured to you for eternity. You regard my stuff for a few years on earth, and with the measure that you have diligently regarded my things, I will take that measure which you measured for yourself, and I will measure it to you, only now the course is multiplied for eternity. You who have regarded my ways with little regard, I will give you little regard. Even Yeshua said, those who teach others to disregard the Torah basically will be the least in the kingdom. They will be disregarded. They'll be, and we think, oh, well, the preaching I've heard is that when you go to heaven, everything is yours. Everything's in abundant forever. Everything. It's like, wait a minute. What if that's not true? What if the ones who fed us that doctrine were kind of trying to sabotage us? Though we didn't know it, though we thought they were teaching us good doctrine, though they've inherited that doctrine, we're spinning it this way and that way, and it's like, well, instead of trying to track down the trail of who lied to who for what reason, why don't we go back and just look at what Yahweh said? As a matter of fact, if you look again in Joel, I believe it is chapter 2, he talked about the devastation that would come upon his people because they rejected his word. And then it says something about the Kohanim crying out to him. He says, rend your hearts, not your clothing. Come to me with lamentation and fasting, weeping and moaning, and I will restore to you. But it's like, wait a minute. I just read another book by someone who said, oh, he's not impressed by your emotion. He just wants you to believe. Really? Does he just want us to believe? We're going to discuss this later. What is the word believe? It's Aleph Mem Nun. The word believe. Aleph Mem Nun. Amen. You could stick yods or vavs in between here and it doesn't change the basic structure of the word. It's where we get amen. Aleph is an A, Mem is a M, and this is an N. And in English, you read it that way. The word's amen. It means, so be it, absolutely, you betcha. To go back to the book of Hebrews, it discusses that Abraham is the father of our faith, the model by which we get the example of what it means to believe. And if you go back to the book of Genesis, Yahweh took Abraham and said, look, I'm going to give you children and descendants. And Abraham says, I don't have any. So for you to bless me, what does that mean? And he says, step outside, look at the stars, count them if you're able. And it says, and Abraham believed, and it was credited to him for righteousness. The book of Hebrews quotes this. So we think, oh, Abraham was told to count the stars if he is able, and of course, he's not able. Nobody can count the stars. Even with a Hubble telescope and all the stuff we have now, it's more impossible to count the stars now. So all he did was say, oh, okay. And it was credited or counted to him or considered
just as good as if he, what's the word righteousness? The word righteousness is zadikah, which has to do with doing good deeds done properly according to what Yahweh said to do. We discussed last week that righteousness is actually translated, it means doing what Yahweh said. There is no other standard for what's right or wrong other than Yahweh said it, so do it, and that's right. If you don't do it, that's wrong. I mean, you can make up morality and ethics, but that's not. Morality and ethics finds its bearing, its compass points to morality and ethics based on what Yahweh said, not what man said. The point is, Abraham was told to sephir the stars. If you're able. Well, the word if is spelled aleph mem. It's also a metropolis, a mother, a womb. It's a place of a factory, like an industrious, where things are, like in a womb, where things are manufactured and put together. And if you look at the Red Dictionary, it says it means if, but it also means on the condition that. It's like, well, wait a minute, now there's a whole different way to read this. Abraham, sephir the stars. Well, we've talked before that the word sephir, samik, pei, resh, if you have fence posts and you connect them, you just sephired the fence posts. If you tell a story, you've sephired. If you take some wild hair and you barber it and you make it look neat, you've just sephired it. The word barber is sephir. To trim things and put them into a recognizable form is the word for sephir. So I believe that Yahweh told Abraham to design the constellations. The mazarot is the word in Hebrew. What does that matter? If we think Abraham was told to count the stars, if you can, well, of course he can't. That's a done deal. He's a model of, he's the father of, he's the progenitor of our faith, according to the book of Hebrews. We should look back at that and say, see, just like what he did, it was counted in for righteousness. So we should say, okay, I believe, and everything's done. What did Abraham do? To sephir the stars is to go to work. The working hand, the yod, represents a working hand, a constructing hand. I'm sitting here wearing a tool belt, had the hard hat on, flames of fire on the hard hat, like Yahweh sitting around flames of fire, surrounded by fire, working, doing something. Abraham was told to do something, and he says, if, or on the condition, aleph mem, according to what you come up with, Abraham, it will be reckoned or calculated or dispensed to your descendants that I promised to give you in order to bring forth or to manifest zadikah, righteousness, to bring forth the things I said that I was going to do. Well, if you look at the verse this way, there's a whole different way to reckon it. In other words, Abraham didn't just sit there and say, well, I can't count the stars. I just sit here and say, okay, I believe, and my job's done. He might have actually gone out there every night for the next 50 years, looking at the stars, calculating, determining, figuring out that there was 12 houses. Remember, the flood was not that many years before, and there used to be apparently this sheet of ice, which is known as the canopy theory, maybe thin, maybe thick, maybe something that diffused the light, maybe something clear. We don't know, but there was a canopy of ice that things could have very well looked completely different. The continents probably shifted during the time of the flood. The terrestrial land masses were different, and now Abraham is going out there and he's looking at things from a whole different point of view. He's told to sephir the stars, and on the condition of what he comes up with, Yahweh is going to bring forth the manifestation of righteousness through his descendants. Now, that means Abraham has a big responsibility. It doesn't mean he's just sitting there doing nothing, believing. It means he's working. He's doing something. He's sephiring the stars. If you'll read a little further in the story of Abraham, it says that he took on, him and his 300 friends took on 5 kings. I was looking at the book of Jasher earlier in this week, and it has a little bit different account. It says that there was perhaps 800,000 men with these 5 kings that had raided the valley where Sodom and Gomorrah were, picked up Lot, pillaged the place, and ran off with them. And it's like, they might have lost a few guys in the battle, but 800,000 men? Abraham and 300 friends took on 800,000 men? Something's wrong with this picture. Maybe the book of Jasher made a mistake. It's like, but then when they talked to Abraham after the battle, because he prevailed, Abraham said, Yahweh, my Elohim, told me that my hand would have success in whatever I put it to. So we went after the 800,000. We won. Now there's a bit of confidence. Abraham was not trusting in his hand. He was trusting in the hand of this guy sitting on the throne, holding the scepter of El Shaddai, ruling the heavens and the earth. And remember, it was Elijah who said to Yahweh, will you please open the eyes of my servant? And he saw the hills full of fiery chariots, full of angels. I had heard a story, I believe it's on the internet, some people could probably corroborate that I believe it was the 6-day war, that Israel had just a few troops and the Syrians were coming in with tanks, and yet they didn't continue the attack, and everybody was kind of mocking the Syrians and saying, they're afraid of a few Jews, and there's a bunch of scaredy cat Arabs. And then somebody went up to the I believe it was the captain of the tank force later and said, why did you guys turn back? I mean, you had us. We thought we were done for. I had heard that they had actually had, I think it was in Tel Aviv, the football field, the stadium, ready for 40,000 coffins, to bury the dead, and only a couple thousand Israelis died during this war. And it's like, it was a miracle. I heard they were talking about it on the radio this week. But they were talking to the Syrian tank commander, and he said, there were fiery angels out there. Those Arabs didn't quit the battle because they were scared of a couple Jews. They saw fiery angels, and they weren't about to go into that conflict knowing that they were dead before they had started. They did the smart thing and didn't continue the attack and turn back. You see, we don't hear these stories of what Yahweh has done, but Abraham heard the stories and he put his hand to the task. Yahweh said, here's my blessing upon you. Whatever you do, I will bless you. Whoever raises his hand against you, I will curse. But whoever blesses you, Abraham, I will give that one a blessing. We discussed a couple weeks ago that there's a verse that Yahweh says, my people are fools. When it comes to righteousness, working righteousness, they're stupid. They don't know what they're doing. But when it comes to working wickedness, they're wise, they're smart, they're cunning, they're crafty, they're tricky. They do every little thing to rob, to pillage, to steal, to extort. But when it comes to righteousness, they don't know anything. The question is, what do we have in this covenant of Yahweh to Israel that's embedded in these letters that if we were smart enough, we'd see it and use it, put our hand to the task of working righteousness. That's what this is about. So if Yahweh says, okay, I'm going to look at my clock here, and after X number of years, then I'm going to give Israel the blessing. I don't see that. Is he sitting there saying, oh, okay, after so many years, okay, I'm going to fire up the old rapture bus here and send it to pick up everybody and harvest the earth. It's just about time. Let's go stand on the mountaintop. I don't think so. But what he does say is this little word here, if, and on the condition of. And then quite often you'll see, if you read it in English, you'll see the word ki, kaf yod, which is translated to mean so, thus, therefore. In other words, if you do this, then, accordingly to how you have done, what's going to happen is this. And every time he talks about giving the blessing to the people or giving the curse to his people, it was dependent on what his people did. So if we could sit there and say, yeah, but what are we supposed to do? I thought we were just supposed to stand here and believe. If we're told we're just supposed to sit here and believe, tell you what, believe the bus is going to come. You might sit here for 10 years on the bus corner. But if you read the sign that says, a bus will be radio dispatched to you if you pick up this phone and call and say you're here. Oh, okay, tell you what, I'll pick up the phone, call the bus, like a taxi, and it'll dispatch to pick me up. That's a whole different story. But if you don't know that's the story, and you figure, oh, I've been told all I have to do is stand here at the bus stop, and a bus will come by and pick me up, and if it doesn't pick me up, it's like, gee, what's wrong? The reason we're studying this Hebrew is to say, what do these letters tell us? What's wrong with the story we've been told? But instead of, poking the finger at who told us what story which is wrong, it's like, look, forget all that. There's no time for that. Let's look at what's right. Let's look at what Yahweh said. And so in the book of Joel, it says, throw this prayer up to Yahweh and say, why should the nations say, ha, where is your God? Why are they saying that? Because we're standing here waiting for the bus and the bus isn't coming? We're sitting here waiting for Yahweh to intervene and to give us the blessing and it ain't happening? Why? Why should they say, where's your Elohim? It's like the people in Babylon took the people of Jerusalem, of Judea, and they took them back and they said, play us songs. You used to have such beautiful songs in Jerusalem. And they said, how can we sing? You guys have ruined our city. Everything is smoking, burning, rotten ash, strewn bodies and corpses, and we're sitting here in chains, and we threw our harps up into the willow trees. So for the week of the Selah, we had the harp up in the willow tree branches. How can we sing praises when we don't see his intervention? Where is this hand that we talked about? Where is this big hand? So in the chart, it's like this, the image of the Shem Zakar, the memorial name. John said he looked up and he saw into the heavens, his eyes were open, and he saw, as it were, Yeshua coming back, El Shaddai, and a sword coming out of his mouth. It's like, what comes out of your mouth? A sword? Do you hold a sword like this? If you got a 3-foot sword, it's pretty hard to hold that in your mouth. What comes out of your mouth? Well, words come out of your mouth, maybe a tongue. Maybe you're holding like that. You're not even supposed to run with scissors, and this guy's riding a horse with a sword in his mouth? That's kind of dangerous, I'm making a joke. I mean, he is the Almighty after all, but he still shouldn't ride horses with swords in his mouth. The point is, what comes out of his mouth? Well, a word. Well, what word? And I was thinking about when I was drawing that picture, because that's a picture of his name, and it was like, well, the word which causes something to exist. The word which says exist, be. Well, the word for be or exist is spelled Yod, Hey, Yod. It's the word Yehi, Yod, Hey, Yod. What he said was Yehi or is spelled Aleph, Vav, Resh, and it's translated, let there be light. And then if you look at it in Hebrew, it says, and, Va, Yehi, Yod, Hey, Yod, or, Aleph, Vav, Resh. Well, if you look at that and say, where's past tense and future tense? If there's a past tense and future tense, there should have been a tav, beginning or end somewhere, but there is no tav. It's Yehi or, Va, Yehi or. In other words, there is no past or present, or it's simply Yehi. Well, then you look at that, and someone might say, where do you come up with all the meanings of the letters? It's like, well, there's 2 yods, and the yod is one that makes. So here is something that's been manufactured. The letter Hey here means to reveal, as we've already discussed that, the 5th letter. And then the yod as a suffix means mine. The artist makes something. There it is. Says, that's mine. So these 2 blue hands of the yod, as it were, you can see in this word that simply means he caused to exist, or he said. Well, it says he said, Vayumer Elohim Yehi or. But to say is to command. And you have to say, well, did he vocalize? Did he speak? That's a whole other thing with whole other words. But if you look at this, he created it, he expressed it or revealed it, and then he called it his own, and then it's the same word. So, in other words, this isn't saying, we've been told this says, he said, let there be, and there was. That's 2 different concepts, 2 different sentences. What this says, when he said Yehi, what happened? Yehi. Not 2 different things, exactly what he said. He said Yehi or, and what happened? Yehi or. But in English we go, I don't understand. So we say, well, what he said was, let there be light, and there was light. You see, already we've derailed the train of thought, putting it into English. And you could say, well, I don't know how to translate the Hebrew. Then don't translate the Hebrew. What I'm saying is, Yehi or, what does that mean? The artist makes it, reveals it, and claims it as his own. And then what happened? The artist made it, makes it, reveals it, and calls it his own. Exactly what he did is all there is. Everything's present tense. The artist who makes it, reveals it, and says it's his own. That's what happened. It's like, oh, okay, now I'm not any longer reading it with this chronological Greek, Latin, English perspective. Part of studying this language is trying to get into the mindset of the language. So now we have to take this a little further and say, when it says, where is their Elohim? Part of one of the things I was talking about the Hebrew language previously was with ayin dalet, ayin tav, until the time. Until what time? I don't know. Where does he tell us what time, right? Daniel 12:4, ayin dalet dash ayin tav, until the time. Daniel hide the words until the book, until the time of Kuf Zadi, which is translated at the end. But until the time of the end. When's the time of the end? And the thing that broke open this whole study was, all of a sudden the thought occurred to me one day, it doesn't tell us what time. It doesn't tell us what this until is, but what if the answer to until when is embedded in the words of until when? So this word ayin dalet literally means a witness, or a testimony. You might say evidence, or booty, which is something that is carried off. Something that is and the word time, atah, aleph, tav, hey, literally means right now, this time. But you might say, until what time? If you break apart these letters, the ayin means understanding, it's an eyeball. The dalet, as we discussed, is a choice or a door. So you could say ayin dalet is see the door, or understand the choice, or understand the door? What door? Where does the door come from? Ayin tav, understand tav. What's tav? Well, tav is the sign of the covenant. What's the covenant? I maintain that the 22 letters are the covenant. It's the format of the covenant. And everything in the scripture which is using those letters to express words are the covenant expressed in different forms. So what you have is the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. If you understand that they talk about the Messiah, Yeshua himself gave us the key when he says, I'm the door. Well, we think Christologically, oh, he's the door, no one can enter the Father except through him. No one can go to heaven except through him. And we might say, well, that's a Christian doctrine. But what if he says, I'm this door? Understand the door, and then you'll understand the covenant. If you understand the Mashiach, the one sent, is the one who is the understanding of the 22 letters, but who's he? He's the guy that the 22 letters describe. It's a catch-22. And if you say, oh, well, until the time that you understand that Yeshua is the one described by the letters, and the letters are describing the Mashiach, and we choose to do what it says, then until the time of the catch-22, like the 22 Hebrew letters, is all of a sudden a reality. A catch-22 is you can't have this unless you have that, and you can't have that unless you have this, which means you have either, neither of, or both. So if you have both, you say, oh, I now know that Yeshua, the guy who said, I am the door, is the one described by the 22 letters, which includes the description of the Sabbath day and the festivals, which is why we can't go along with the Christian version that says he did away with those. Then we can look at that and say, this is that time. So what is this other word? How many minutes do we have left, Jamie? 5 minutes. Why should they say, where is their Elohim? Where? That word where is aleph, yod, hey. Ayah! Where? Ayah! I. Look at the dictionary. It means an island. It means not. It means if. It means where? And the Hay remembers to reveal, and so they're saying, why should the nations say, where is their Elohim? Where is this hand that's supposed to help them? Where is the blessing? Where is the promise of his coming? Remember, that's what the infidels, the heathen, the pagans like to scoff at the believers and say, where is he? Why hasn't he shown up yet? Well, gee, because until this time, we haven't been doing what he said, because we were told by others, the keepers of the books, the clerics, the clerks, the clergy, that we didn't have to. The purpose of learning Hebrew is to come back and say, where is he? Well, here's another interesting thing about it, what's embedded between the aleph and the yod, just like until the time. The aleph is the first letter, the yod is the 10th. It's a group of 10. A group of 10 is called a minyan, and a minyan is spelled mem nun, min. We'll get into that later, but there's another nun back. But the mem nun is like the word aleph mem nuns. It says, I will. It has to do with bringing forth something as a collection which will cause a harvest. And you could say, what's between aleph and yod? Aleph as a prefix means I will. Yod as a suffix means this is mine. And so where is their Elohim? He's hid himself in the letters between aleph and yod. We just went through 10 weeks of talking about what these letters mean. Did you see them? Did you think about the letters close enough to say, he's right there where he said in his words? The reason to discuss Hebrew is to say, why isn't he manifesting himself? Because he also gave us conditions. The next word, the next letter after the yod, which is the 11th letter, is the kaf. The number 11. Sometimes the kaf is written like this because it's an open hand with a thumb sticking out. Or sometimes it's written like this, which is spun around to be the letter K, letter kaf. But the point is, after the yod comes the kaf. But the word kaf yod means if, thus. This is me, this is you. And so we'll get into this afterwards. I'll see if I can do this real fast. We got like 2 minutes before the end. Play around a little bit here. Hanna-Barbera cartoons had Yogi and Boo Boo. Remember the bear? Yogi. So how did you spell it? Yod, Gimel, maybe an Aleph Yod, Yogia. Well, the word Yod is where we get the word yoke, which is to say the one that I'm joined to, which is a union. The word Gia is where we get the word valley, which joins two mountain ranges. So yogi is literally in Hebrew, if you take the phonetics, it's the one that joins the two together. It's the one I'm yoked to. In boo-boo, you might say that's bet vav, and if you look it up in the dictionary, you might get a bet vav aleph yod. It comes from an Arabic word which means little baby or a reflection or an image, or the twinkle in your eye, the apple of your eye. We are the boo-boo of the yogi Yahweh. We're supposed to be the little image reflection. And if you look what Moshe said to Israel, he said, how fortunate are you, Israel? Who is like you? The word is mikamoka. Who's like you? But mikamoka is the phrase used to describe Yahweh. Yahweh. Who is like you? Mikamoka. But Moses said that about Israel. Why? Because Israel is the boo-boo of Yahweh. He's the little guy, the reflection in the image. Lucky Israel. Oh, lucky, isn't that a Luciferian word? No. Lucky. Lamed Kaf Yod. You see, unto. Kaf is a prefix of a word, means like. And Yod is a suffix, means my. Like unto me. Just like me. Israel is fortunate to be just like me if they will just do what he said. Everything that Yahweh has is for Israel, and as we'll look at these words in the later part of the meeting here, he's got all this stuff stored up, waiting to give to Israel. And when I say stuff, I don't mean material objects, I mean the prestige, the clarity of mind, sanity, wisdom, and the fear and regard of all Israel's adversaries, that they better not touch the apple of Yahweh's eye. That's like the twinkle of your eye, the pupil of your eye, which it's like, boy, you will do anything to protect the pupil of your eye. It's a natural instinct. Yahweh will do everything to protect his people. And you keep reading it, but what he says is, it's conditional. The sworn oath is that your forefathers agreed to, and we are now under the burden of, which is another part of the story, we better do what he said. Our forefathers agreed to it, and we are now suffering under the burden of the infraction. And any time, Yahweh said, any generation all these many years, had the option to come back. Why didn't they? Well, we're now, regardless of why they didn't, we are now outside the 2,730-year curse, which is the 7 times 390 as of 2010, which puts us here. So this little thing, just for what it's worth, Tim and Jean made this up. Leolam va'ed, universe construction, the Aleph Tav. Dressed like, this is the hand, this is Yahweh's constructing hand, universe construction unto forever. Leolam va'ed. This little patch we're going to make available for people to get. There's a little glitch. They just got this to me the minute before we started here tonight. Again, if we think, he created this universe to endure forever. Well, he's going to make a new heaven and a new earth, but what about that is new? Is heaven coming here? Are we going to heaven? Is he coming back here? Or should we go to heaven and then come back? Or how's it going to work? We've been told a bunch of stories. The point is, we have a lot to look forward to. The maker of the universe, according to Aleph Mem Tav, the truth. According to the truth, we have a lot to look forward to. And the matters are hidden in the language. One last thing, we got 1 minute. I'll get into this later. But why the Tarzan yell? What's up with that? How would you spell Tarzan? Let's see. Tav, Resh, Zion, Noon. Zion Noon, look up in the dictionary, means a sect or a kind or a group or a type. Resh Zion means secret. And Tav Resh is a searcher or explorer. Are you the type that would search and explore for the secrets of the creator of the universe that he's made to endure forever? Or then you're rather a Tarzanic group. Hence the yodeling behind the excavator of the constructor of the universe. We're going to take a break.